I thought that was phenomenal when I saw that. Now, what I'm interested in, does anyone see, there were a number of things that jumped out at me about things we talked about in class, specifically. Anything crop up? Yeah?
The fact that it calls the different parts of the brain circuits, which makes me think of like a closed loop, a machine, stuff like that.
Absolutely. And he's putting electricity through circuits. I mean, it's a simplistic, he's oversimplifying for the sake of this, but there's more than that. What about sense of self?
That it can be changed.
That was the thing that hit me, totally. This idea of who you are, and it was this. Oops, where's the little diagram we had? Oops, it's not quite come up there.
Different parts of the brain do.
I don't know if you can all see that.
I want to be able to beat tall buildings in a single bound.
Unfortunately, your brain doesn't control that activity, but he's talking about different brain functions, and I'm not sure why he put them in these categories, but he talks about movement, you know, and how we can turn down some of the movement. He talks about memory and cognition with the Alzheimer's, and he talks about depression. But we can change your drive and ambition. We can change your love and hate, your avarice, generosity. I don't know, he didn't talk about any of these areas, but they're on his slide. I find myself in your judgment and empathy. I find myself coming back to this slide and thinking, wow, you know, can we turn these up and down in people? Theoretically, there's no reason why not. If we can do it from memory, we can do it. People would say happiness and sadness is an emotion, and we can change that emotion by electricity. So can we change this emotion, this emotion? I don't know, but it kind of gave me a big wow factor this afternoon when I saw this. Anyone want to talk about that? Go.
Body image, what is body image?
Body image, your perception of yourself, how you see yourself.
So if, like, for example, I'm fat and I use the technique to make me think I'm thin.
Or change your racial profile, or anything, yeah, potentially, or see yourself, I don't know, but maybe feel better about yourself, I don't know.
So like a lot of that kind of stemmed from the fact that it can maybe, because I know like depression was one of the things they were talking about. I mean, obviously I would assume that they were putting it people that were depressed that were essentially making them happy. So like what if things like body image, like drive and ambition, like love and hate kind of stem from happiness?
Yeah, well, they're obviously connected.
Yeah.
You know, you know, you're happier when you're in love, I assume. So we hope. So they must be connected. But I, you know, but it's the very idea that they can pick this. I've heard of this concept before, that there are parts of the brain that control different things. I've not read extensively on this at all, but just seeing them choose this little bit, put a probe in there, switch some electricity on, and you're happier. It actually freaks me out a little bit. You know?
Electroshock. This is just a more fine-tuned version of electroshock for depressed people.
Yeah. I mean, they used to do, what was it called? Lobotomy is where they actually cut stuff out, isn't it? And electroconvulsive therapy.
Right. They used to use very, very high doses, but they're back using it again, I understand. But at much lower doses with much more controlled. Right.
People who are very depressed and nothing else to work on, they'll give them electroconvulsive therapy. Which, yeah, this is like a more fine-tuned, better version of that.
But it amounted to torture, basically.
But I mean, I was were most of you pretty amazed by this? I've never seen anything like this, at this level of detail, changing emotions like this.
It reminds me of when I was reading about Warwick, because he works with people who do deep brain stimulation. He does this guy only hints for 1 second. Maybe we can make people smarter.
Yeah.
Kevin Warwick doesn't hint at it. He says, "This is why I'm working with deep brain stimulation, is to make myself smarter."
Yeah, that's it. But in the comments under here, there's a lot of people talking about some of the things we talked about in class. They are talking about repair and people who are suffering from something. At which point do we say, you know, I just want to be happier. You know, I'm all right, but I want to be happier. Or I just want my memory to be better, and I'll pay for that. I mean, theoretically, if someone puts this on you, it increases your function, you can have better memory. This augmentation, this transhuman, this thing we're talking about. I find all of it fascinating. Richard, yeah.
Well, I'm reminded of Brave New World, which is a negative look at the same thing, and I'm sure
it focuses quite strongly on genetics.
Yeah, and it is scary. It also is very. Who among us would want to not find out if we could cure Alzheimer's, and especially people of some age. It's very scary. It's very powerful. I'm sure terrible things would come out of it, and also wonderful things.
Are you all familiar with Brave New World?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone know? Yeah, Aldous Huxley. It's a book from, I don't know when it was written. Early century?
Yeah, get the date.
19, I'd say 9, 12, 9, 10, 9,
I have
12.
a memory left.
I think it was about 1930 for that.
Oh yeah, probably about that, 9, 10.
Or the late
It's a science fiction novel about future dystopian society with, it's like 1984, but a lot worse.
because it's
a lot of it is about genetic engineering and training people, and
Right.
control of society, yeah.
Here's one of the questions I have. Let's say you want to improve your memory and cognition. Let's just stay with memory. Let's say you graduated with a BS from SUNY Oswego in 2014, 2013. If you went in and did the operation, would you remember all the stuff that you don't have any access to now? In other words, think about all those classes where you just got a C. Would you actually, with your memories improved in such a way where you would have access to the stuff that you learned, but you don't remember learning, that you heard? Right? Or would you then, you kind of understand what I'm saying? Or would you then, only after you have the stimulation, have improved memory?
Freud's regressed memories coming back.
Yeah, that's a question that I'd be intrigued by.
Doesn't that depend on the model of memory that you subscribe to?
It probably does, but I'm wondering what experiments along these lines might teach us about this very question.
But that's what he said. If you look at his discussion of what Alzheimer's, and we're talking on quite a surface, simple level here, but he talked about this analogy of lights being turned off and turned back on. Those neurons have stopped working, receiving glucose to fire, and we switch them back on. And he seemed to be saying, but he didn't talk about the memories, that the memories return because the connection weights are still there. The connection weights are almost physical, so they're kind of chemical, electrochemical, but I don't know. Any of the cog scientists want to talk about that? Whether do you think the memories would return?
It all depends on how much damage there is. Because if you have really, really, really bad Alzheimer's, most likely there's not anything there. Whereas like early onset, it's like the neurons just shut down. So if you can save them, like a stroke, you can save someone with a stroke right now by blasting glutamate at them.
Blasting what?
Glutamate, neurotransmitter, because it actually shuts down the bleeding in the brain, so it doesn't kill as many neurons. So it sounds like they're almost doing it. They're, instead of using like a neurotransmitter, they're just using deep brain stimulation to shut things down to make things work. Is what at least I'm getting out of it. But I might be wrong.
What about the cases like trauma, where like a person gone through a real traumatic event, like for a event that came from war, for example, and he goes through for PTSD, they put an electrode shock, whatever, and he's able to like all those repressed feelings just come back to him. I can see some pros and cons.
When we are suffering from extreme trauma, I can almost guarantee there's a portion of the brain that is at 100 degrees, as he described. I'm using his terminology. And I theoretically, we could use this to stop that reaching 100 degrees. So
the way it was proposed, I can see the pharmaceutical industry like shaking it, like so much money will be lost. Like, even though it was.
Well, this is not going to be a cheap treatment. Neurosurgery will not be cheap. It won't be cheaper than a pill.
It sounds like a great alternative to taking a pill, though.
Yes, very much. But the question for us is, so if the PTSD is a perfect example. I have suffered a traumatic event. I now cannot experience that trauma as a human being would, because this is turning it down. Am I still me? This idea of conception of self, the way we are changing. If I change if we put a deep neural probe into every Wall Street banker so that they don't have the avarice to ruin the economy, are they still human, and were they human in the first place? We can, but you see the point of my question, does it change who we are? We discussed even the simulations we experience may change who we are. This is actually, we're changing something physical in the brain, but is that changing me? Because we have this concept of consciousness. Is it changing that, or is it just the physical?
Maybe like a post-op perspective of our memories and our experiences might change, but I don't know, because I only think I am based off my mistakes, my experiences, my traumatic events, whatever. But at the same time, if I was to go under this, I'll probably view my past as completely different. I'll probably still retain those memories, but view them in a totally different light.
I agree, but here's another. A lot of science fiction, a lot of the media around science fiction talks about these ideas of dystopian societies where there is some mechanism of control, usually to keep people happy. And this exact thing, that if everyone has either this pill or this thing, I mean, why wouldn't someone say, well, why don't we just make everyone happier? And this comes down to wearing a hat. You wear the hat, you're happy, everyone wears the hat. All of a sudden, do we not have any great literature because there's we've all changed? I don't know. Patrick, Anthony.
Well, can't you just imagine kind of a future where they say, yeah, we'll dull your appetite down, we'll make you happy all the time. If we can do something with your avarice or whatever, your greed, make you a better consumer.
You want to turn that up?
Well, yeah, I can imagine that the companies that are feeding off that sort of thing might want to, if they can front the money to make you not so hungry or make you happy or whatever. Why wouldn't they do
But imagine if you could go into the local pharmacy because now we're talking about putting this thing down into your brain. They'll be able to transmit the electricity from a remote device eventually, pinpoint the area, wear a hat, it will transmit it. You can go to a pharmacy, buy one of these, and it makes you happy with it.
Let me try this variation on the theme idea. What if it's self-determining, so that I can decide, today I just really want to be pissed off. So I'm going to turn up the volume of the heat on my being angry.
Well, that's the Philip K. Dick do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, they just dial in emotions because, oh, I haven't felt depressed in a while.
Yeah.
I think his wife does that, dials in for some
So rather
depression.
than imagining it's some kind of external control or manipulation, right? What if it's an actual deliberate choice on our part?
Yeah, but again, are we still human? Are we still human with that, even though we're controlling? But what's the difference between doing that and taking a pill? The pill changes are brain chemistry.
I think I like the fact that I might have more control over the thermostat.
the Buddhist monks, the people who are into enlightenment, isn't that really a lot of what they're going for, is complete control over their body and their emotions? And
Yeah.
that's what, and to a certain degree, that's what mankind is searching for, is to be able to
So,
dial up or dial
but
down anger.
you see, a Buddhist monk has to train for 30 years of meditation to gain complete control. I can put a hat on and have complete control, you know? Hmm?
It's just convenience.
It's convenient.
Whatever makes me feel good now is what I want to do.
Yeah, but you don't
I mean, the societal implications are one thing, but I'm more interested in this kind of what it does to yourself. The thing we've been talking about in class, this idea of self, of consciousness, of mind versus body. There's two of them. But Katie, first, you were...
When you brought up the idea of taking the pill, does that change you? And I feel like that has the same effect. You know, like if somebody were to take like a antidepressant or something, you know, that changes how they are. I mean, that changes who they are, how they interact with you, and that kind of thing. When they stop taking it, that changes them again. You know. So I don't know. Like, is it any different than taking a pill? I mean,
I don't think so, because I think if you take a pill and change your body chemistry, or if you put electricity into your brain and change the brain that way, I don't see a difference in that, but
it's a different process, right?
It's a process, but you're changing the physicality.
Because the pill isn't necessarily intervening electrically. I mean, there may be electrical consequences, but I think it's a different...
Well, mechanical intervention takes a little bit of time.
Yeah. But you're changing, let me get this right, you're changing the thatness, not the whatness.
Well, I was wondering when we get around to that old language. We were toying around with.
Mm.
I'm not sure whether it's fatness or whatness. I'm trying to think about that one.
Oh, I love it. We've confused Patrick on his what's and that's. Fantastic. Good hit point. Brian was next. He's been...
Well, I think the issue with, even having full control over it is it's sort of like a hollow victory sort of deal. Like, yes, you can be happy all the time, but are you really happy? Not in the are you chemically happy, but are in the do you deserve to be happy for the situation that you are in? Which I think does play a large part in determining any sort of emotion.
Who's going to say they deserve to be happy?
Well, see, I guess it's just one of those things. If you're happy every single day of your life, it feels, I don't know, maybe it's just me from being a person who is not chemically happy every single day of his life, but it feels like there would be a diminishing return to that. If I'm happy every single day, how do I know that I'm truly as happy as I should be? How do I know if I'm really appreciating my joy unless I'm feeling miserable? Yeah, you would lose your reference point.
There's been a lot of people talked about this, that to be happy you need the balance, but it's a common...
yeah.
I feel like I'm
appreciation of your happiness. Take a happiness pill and take an appreciation pill.
Sorry, you were next, so...
I understand the biological constructs, but things such as like empathy and judgment, things like that kind of emerge out of experiences. Like, I understand that you can turn up that, so to speak, but like with a criminal, if you turn that up, he's still going to be a criminal. Is he still going to be a criminal? Like, is he going to be like, oh, well, now that I know what empathy is, I don't want to steal stuff anymore? Or is, like, there could be like a disconnect between what goes on up here and what you actually do.
There are psychological disorders which are classified as lack of empathy.
Right.
So theoretically, we can put, I'm guessing they can turn that back on in sociopaths or the kind of like, I'm completely guessing. That's what they are. I mean, sorry, these people will get so. Go on.
I guess my question would be if happiness has a intrinsic cause. So, like Brian was saying, if you have to have some sort of success in order to be happy. But if you can just go to happiness, then you've kind of escaped any kind of causal means.
There's a lot of evidence to suggest that people who succeed in life through their own endeavours become happier than people who win the lottery. The kind of causal. I can't quote studies, but there's much anecdotal evidence, and you read about, you know, these kind of pop science studies on it. So it's a fulfillment, yeah, sense of worth. And I also feel that there's maybe a contextual thing to it. You know, just switching on happiness. We're happy, as Brian said, for a reason. You know, which something that happens. So. For time.
Having complete control over it, it reminds me of the kind of feeling you have when I remember playing like lots of video games, and I would love the game. I'd play for a long time, it would be great. And then I would discover the cheat codes, and then, you know, control the game whatever way I please, and then it would become boring after a minute. I don't know, I just kind of imagine a world where someone has like a really, just a genuinely crappy day, but they're smiling and happy the whole time. I feel like that would cause some problems.
I like that.
It's a fascinating issue, isn't it? This one, I must admit, this TED talk just really got me this afternoon. And it was this image that got me. Just, wow, you're up.
Taylor, what was your point again? Bring me back to it.
Well, if happiness has a cause, so in this case, the cause of your happiness would be whatever surgery you're going through. Or pill or whatever. I guess I'm kind of equating it to like the happiness that you would have, you know, if you get drunk or something like that. And what kind of a happiness is that versus and compared to what kind of a happiness you would have through this kind of surgery. And then against the happiness that you get, say you get an A on a test or something like that, or you finally, you know, achieve your life ambition. And the happiness that follows it.
By your own skills.
Right, so there's like a varying degree of happiness, and then the happiness felt all has differences within them. So there's I think there's a problem with defining happiness.
Yeah, sort of. I think what I would be thinking about would move in that direction too. That any of these states seems to be dependent on the other states. So he's talking about just isolating certain regions of the brain and producing changes in one kind of thing or another. But it seems to me that when what we're talking about the self, or about sort of the experience of living one's life day to day, that operates at a different level, where the day that you have is either a good day or a bad day, or a mixed bag, depending on how things interact with each other. So meaning, one of the theories of meaning that I've been proposing that we consider all semester is that meaning it's not a thing that you find in some place. It's actually the interaction of different semiotic systems. So you can think of all these things as different kinds of semiotic systems. And meaning, I think, would result in the interaction among them, not just by. So if you change any one element, it's going to change the way it interacts with all the other elements.
But he did say that because when he did the depression, he talked about centres for drive and ambition and decision making that were reduced, and he just changed this one and the others rose because they're obviously linked.
Right, but what I'm saying is I want to factor that into the discussion. In other words, that there's an interaction that's happening, so that when we talk about coming up with a simple modification, it may not be that modification that's responsible for the change in the experience. It's the way the modification changes the interactions among all the others.
Yeah.
Now that, if you see that point, then you can take the next step to reason this way, that there isn't any self. Okay? We often think of the self as an origin that brings about a cause, that initiates something like a movement. But if you reverse that understanding of the self and think of the self as something that, instead of causing something, you think about the self as the result of a cause, of a series of mutually reciprocal interactions, then what we mean by me is the me that gets realized in the behaviors and in the actions and in the choices that happen to me. So me becomes the result rather than the origin.
Okay,
Is that helping with your puzzle?
But still, even if you yourself or the result, your sense of self is determined by the external interactions,
or the internal
internal
and external interaction.
If the chemistry or the electricity of your brain is changed, your perception will change, your response, your decision, all the things will change.
And so I just become a little bit different than what I am now, or maybe majorly different.
But this is the fundamental question.
But myself is becoming, not being.
Okay.
And we could say that that's the case, that's the way it is now, only we've been deceived by these older models of understanding what it means to be human.
Okay. So explain that what self is becoming.
There is no doer, they're just deeds. And it's the sum total of the deeds that create the illusion of the self or the doer. So if you simply want to think of it in terms of cause and effect, what do we say? We say that, well, okay, there's causes and they bring about effects. This is an old argument that Nietzsche plays around with in the Willpower Notebooks. So let's call the cause a doer, and let's call the effects deeds. Okay? Well, if all we have are effects, if all we have are actions, then it's really the deeds that are the origin of the doer. It's reversed. The binary is reversed. So that we see all this action, right? And we reason, oh, there must be a cause. But in fact, that's the reasoning that there must be a cause is actually a fiction. Okay. Is that weird enough for you?
I think so.
But this is the thought that's been around since the late 19th century in a big way. And it's this way of thinking that actually may have brought about this kind of science.
That relates to this. How does that correlate?
Well, I'm speaking to the question about self that you were posing. So there is no self here. There is no me here. All there are these interactions, these complex interactions. And based on my kind of getting a glimpse of some of those, the ones that I'm aware of, the ones that I remember, and so on, I say, oh, that's me. But this I that I am for Lacan, the ego is mad. For most of us in this line of theory, the subject is projected. It's projected onto a screen almost, if you want to get back to your notion of screens. It's just an illusion. I hate to say it, Damien. There is no me.
Well, let me just respond to that and then we'll go to a couple of others. But that opens up to me, we had this fundamental discussion about machine consciousness and whether it had to be like human consciousness.
Yeah.
That it didn't have to be. And so what I'm seeing from that is our sense of self and our consciousness, whether we change it chemically, whether we change it later, doesn't really matter. It still is what I'm reading from this. That's just another interaction that causes who we are.
It may matter, okay, but it won't matter in exactly the way we imagine it mattering. So, if that makes some sense. So I don't want to say there's no ethical question here or anything like that, but it's not. We just have an old vocabulary. Let me try it that way. We just have an old vocabulary for the nature of the self and the soul and identity. And it's full of errors. And these insights that we're seeing in a TED Talk like this, or whenever we're examining any of the transhumanism materials, these materials are basically pointing that out, that the old language doesn't work. And the evolutionary biologists often tell us something quite similar.
Well, let's hear from an evolutionary biologist. You wanted to ask.
This actually reminds me of a quote from one of my favorite books. It's Free Will by Sam Harris. It's like 70 pages. It's really short, where he just basically annihilates free will. It just shows how it doesn't hold up to any kind of like rational argument at all. And given what we know about neuroscience today, and one of the quote is, "We're not in control of the storm, and we're not lost in it either. We are the storm." So, like as he's saying, all these effects, all these he calls them deeds, or every effect and cause that is happening, is we are a part of that kind of stream of happening. We're not. And we only make these kind of post hoc judgments looking back saying, oh, that was me. You know, this part's with me and this part wasn't, but really it's all us. Because we're inseparable from the physical reality that we have.
I like that. Yeah. I like to think I'm not responsible for all my bad decisions.
Well, you're just the sum total of all this.
There's a couple more. We'll have a couple more, then we do have to move on to something else.
The concept of there is no me, and like you are what you experience, and you have to think you are this conviction. Remind me of my favorite book, Together. I don't know if you guys ever read it, but it emphasizes the whole society's sameness. You know, like as people grow older, you know, you're given a memory of certain like emotions. Like today you feel pain, today you feel what it is to be happy. And it's such a empathetic way of functionalizing. But in their society, they would be utopian. It's like a real way of life. But at the same time, they don't get the experience of the memory. They just get you're given this, and just from the giver, it's like a big idea. But I don't know, just brought that to my mind. I just know that word.
There's something that's coming up is, I'm getting the impression from you that, and I know this is this kind of human chauvinism, that this concept doesn't feel right to most humans. It seems anti, because of this established sense of self we all have. We rebel against it instinctively, and I'm getting that, that can't be right, and I know we all feel that, Yeah, go on, Aaron, let you respond.
I just read John Brockman, one of John Brockman's book. It's called What is Your Dangerous Idea? And one of them was this neuroscientist that was saying the dangerous idea is that we don't have free will. And it's basically ideas that are true but are dangerous because they're true. And his whole essay is like two pages. It's questioning whether you can actually maintain your sanity while actually believing that you don't have free will. Can you actually maintain your sense of self?
Well, I'll be interested to see where you are in 10 years.
See how it pans out.
See how it pans out for you. Brian, you can finish this one and we go after.
Well, just because you mentioned this stuff, just looking at this, these sort of horror to being done with this, all you have to do is put on a hat and feel sort of emotion. So what if someone feels sort of emotion, but they go out, they feel an exceptional amount of hate, they go out and they kill someone, does it then become a question of, did they just not have enough empathy put into them, or then, what do we do with this person now? Do we make them feel more of these positive emotions, perhaps curb this, or do we punish them by, trashing their body image, making them feel nothing but sadness? Just the horror of a person being trapped in their own mind with this inflicted sort of destructive madness.
But the thing that really wowed me was the fact this isn't science fiction, that we can do these things. And I could, I'd love to be able to, from a human-computer interaction point of view, I want to experiment with all this stuff. I want to see it, I want to see what works, what doesn't. I'm really fascinated by this,
Let me just...
I'll finish that by saying I'll happily have a happiness chip put in me. Philip's not
You can turn down my appetite. One thing to do though, once you see this, once you take this movement, and right, then when I said that the doer, the origin, the notion of agency here is a fiction, it's really very important to then say, well, okay, well, what follows from that? Because fictions have real consequences. Fictions do things, okay? So I don't want to say that fictions are ineffectual, or that once we label something a fiction, it's no longer significant or of any use at all. So if we say that the notion of free will is a necessary fiction, or a necessary lie is sometimes the phrase that gets used, well, it's basically then, it says, okay, now, well, think about it, okay? If we have people who are intellectuals and physicians who are trained in how to manipulate these systems. So their sense of themselves as caregivers, as people who help to ease pain and suffering, or to enhance knowledge, that then does feed into the kinds of interactions that happen over here. So you do have to keep thinking this through the circle, if you will. And I'll stop with that.
Yeah. Right.
It's all a simulation.
Yeah, it's all simulation. Right. What I want to ask you, I guess I've heard from a few of you. You all enjoy talking to the Australians. Was it fun? Was it good? Good nodding. It was all right. Yeah, it was. I do enjoy it. Now, what we have to come up with is something to do for the next couple of weeks with the Australians. Their class is slightly different. They're particularly looking at narrative. As you saw, they're doing a lot of science fiction narratives, robots, singularity, things like that, looking at those narratives. And we have to think, I really liked when you guys were talking about the singularity. That was great, talking backwards and forwards and talking about the robot. And one of the things I thought we could do is, obviously they're not looking at the same subjects we are, but they're writing about those subjects. And my idea was that somehow we should get them engaged in some of the conversations we're having and talk about those conversations. Yeah? Now, I'd like you to kind of lead this and go with it. It's you guys talking to them about how we should do this. And somehow we have to come up with, we're running out of time, so it's going to be a small thing, but something we can do for an assessment. And we'll decide by next week, but I'm interested in knowing what you think about this and what you'd like to do, you know?
Damon, do we know how many students there are?
There's about 10 in the class, but there was about 5 who were there at first and others kind of trailed in.
Because what could be interesting was maybe take the groups that we formed already, pair us up with 1 or 2. That
was Patrick's idea too. He came up with the same idea.
Great minds,
because it would.
Yeah, and but what would you do? I mean, we could have a discussion group, sure, but I'd like you talking face to face. We've got the technology to do this. You just switch on a webcam, the things are there. You know, you can talk to each other. I'd like you to talk, but I don't know. What do you want to do? What do you want to come up with them? You know, do you want to? We can do some sort of discussion thing, but
yeah, just brainstorm. So we can find out what they're reading and see whether whether it's related to Galileo or any other things, or any other articles we went over, and find out any relevance that we could just.
I think one of the things that's very similar to what I was thinking of. I was thinking what you could do is you could be act as kind of technical consultants to them. You know, that we could set up a kind of job for you guys as we are coming in as consultants to help you, you know, with your writing. And we're going to, and this was always part of our idea of mixing these different groups together. We're going to help you think about things at a deeper level within your fiction based on the things we've talked about. And so you'd go in, and that would involve the readings, the articles, sharing with them, and that could be done in the small groups. That was kind of my thought, but yeah. Bobby, you were...
I was just going to say what you said.
Hmm?
I was just going to say what you said.
Yeah.
More about their narratives than anything they're reading.
Lisa talked about something with the robots, but we'll do something with the robots. I'm going to give a robot demo to them on Tuesday. We'll show them the dancing robots. But one of that will mainly be for the group going to Australia. We'll continue with robot work and we'll continue working on it. However, anyone else who wants to work on that, to continue working remotely from here, will be able to do that with us as well. You know, and I hope some of you will, because we're going to do something interesting. We're going to do some interesting stuff. I do like the idea of doing a small fiction with them, with the robots, a little scene that they help write and we create a little, something original, rather than, up till now I've been doing scenes from plays, but doing something new and original production is going to be interesting.
Other thoughts, things that you might want to, I don't know if you had answers.
Brian?
This is just concerning the robots doing plays. I don't know, since you first showed those robots, I really wanted to see them doing like one of the monologues from Gary and Ross. Just because it seems like it'd be really funny to see robots swearing and talking about the numbers.
Yeah?
It's just a complete aside, but it's just like, oh, he's not doing plays.
Oh, I've had so many ideas. I want to remake Pulp Fiction. But I've got so many ideas, but you know, I think it would be brilliant. But,
You mean our neighbors feel like, I just said that. People said it.
oh, sorry. Yeah.
Would it be possible for us to get just a brief description of each of the students' projects?
I think that's good. The Australian students have just added to Canvas, so we've just put them in. So hopefully we can join them to groups and things. I'm going to talk to Lisa over the weekend. You know, we're going to have some communication and kind of finalise what we're doing. But any other ideas? I mean, I'm quite happy for this, of you acting as consultants to them. I mean, we've got to do some form of assessment. It doesn't have to be a big thing, because it's near the end of the semester. We're not going to do a big thing, but we'll do something. I don't quite know what.
When you say some form of assessment, what are you meaning there? Because that term gets used so many different ways. You mean this, where we assess them, or where the students are assessing each other? Or
students assessing each other.
Experience.
That might be a good way. Get the Aussie students to assess your contribution to their work. How about that?
No.
Yeah, how helpful you were. That would be good. I love peer assessment. I love students assessing each other, because guess what? I don't have to grade it. It's one of my favourite forms of assessment. But no, it's also very empowering to grade other people's work. It is. It's a good thing.
Students are harsher. Students grade harsher.
They do grade harsher, actually, yeah. They do. Yeah.
What are some of the most, when you're just thinking about the topics that we've discussed so far, and where do your own thoughts take you? What are sort of the issues that stay with you, given the full range of things that we've been talking about this semester?
Right.
How easily everything in this sort of system can be abused for the I don't know, helping really screw up that time.
You see, you need your optimism gene wrapped up.
Anyway, just come with what are some of the things that stay with you, the questions, the problems?
The attorney test, the whole, they mess with, the whole likeness towards the artificial computer information, how human perception of that changes to be comfortable or uncomfortable. I like that. In that, it's sort of the whole AI.
What the rest of you?
There's always been a question for me the whole class is, at what point can we say that a computer or something is having an experience?
And that's a relationship between consciousness and experience. Or do you relate consciousness to experience?
I guess.
Can you say a little bit more about how the question sort of surfaces for you?
Right, well, like, I don't know, I mean, so, I guess it's, I don't really know, I have a good idea of what I mean when I say I have an experience. I experience things, but I don't really know what that means. So I don't know when I can say that a computer is having an experience either. But it's not, at some point it has to be true, right? If they're getting, if it's modeling, if it's a model of a brain, for example, then it's doing the same things that my brain is doing. So it must be experiencing something. But, I mean, I don't know if there's like a point where it crosses and all of a sudden now it's officially having an experience, or if it's computers now, or computers 10 years ago or whatever, we're having at a rudimentary level something we can call an experience.
I think Patrick's answer would be we don't have the language.
Something got something like that, or we could start to substitute words and things and say, well, if experience means monitoring what's happening, then we get into the Minsky stuff on layered neural nets. So that if you have a series of neural nets that are monitoring lower levels of neural nets, then maybe that's what experience might mean for a neural net. It may not be that that's an adequate description of what happens for us as humans, but it does lead us to the possibility that there may be ways in which machine experience and human experience correlate. So it may not be the same, but I think it moves us a little bit in the direction of answering a question like that. So one of the reasons I'm asking this is because if all of you could identify questions like this, then these are the questions you could bring to the conversation with the students in Australia.
It'd be nice to get something for you over the weekend I can email out to Canvas so you can all know what the Australian students are predominantly interested in.
It's similar to the exercise that we performed at the beginning of the semester, getting you together in groups and saying what's the question you want to think about as a group. So just sort of what are the questions that persist for you? That's basically whenever you're done with a course or a degree program, that's what happens in life. You say, oh, I'm going on to the next level, and I'm going to bring my questions with me, and I hope that maybe I'll refine some in a way that'll be useful for further work. And maybe I just have to throw out some of the ones that aren't working so well.
One thing that really has been popping out to me this whole semester is probably the sense of self in the face of technology.
And tell me a little more about how that question feels or where the pressure is.
More of the human sense of self and maybe the change towards newer technology, and the wonder of the sense of self of the machine, if it could happen, if it might, or if it is already somewhere.
Very similar.
I'm going with that kind of the dynamic interaction between the sense of self and the perception of the external world through a mediated technology. I think that goes what you said.
So it's an interaction between the internal and the external worlds in relationship to some self-image.
Right, and you know, like looking through a camera and how you then perceive, you know, an HD camera, how you perceive the world, and then, you know, yes.
I know probably the one thing that's stuck with me is Martha's word to text and the process, I guess, that our group did. How there really isn't that distinction, in my opinion, but there is. Like it's that
the word text distinction.
That we don't think about it until we're asked to think about it. Because a book is just a book to us; it's filled with information. But the book is actually different than what is in the book.
It's this complex interaction of code or something.
Yep.
That word text distinction is very useful for that, especially if you think about the way Baudrillard introduces the notion of code.
I guess for me, like one of the things like always kind of kept going back to was like the idea of like what it means to like be human. Like for instance, like does this make you any less human than what you were before you had it? And like at what point do we kind of look at the artificial intelligence as more human like us?
But